And they called him to be a bishop in the neighboring town. It was hard for him. It was hard as any pioneer put on for him and his son, the little boy,
60
and his
miles.
wife, to come 60 miles to church. So, I mean, the pioneer spirit is, I think, serving. It's taught us to think of other people and there to help them help them need it. Now, some of you have told this story, but it's in my time. And that is when I was a missionary over in Sweden, little town of Falköping. I was a missionary there. No members, no church house, nowhere to gather. We had to hire a meeting hall to have our street meetings in. Nothing. We were 30 miles away from the church house, and we cycled to every other Sunday to attend church. In that town, there was a fellow that came in from Denmark because he was a goldsmith. There was no gold in Denmark right after the war. And he approached us and said, I don't want anything to do with your church, but I want to learn English because I'm going to go to America. That was his goal. But he attended every street meeting. He did everything he could. And I helped him to go to America. My brother Jay signed for it. He lived with my folks. The war, he was there to make decorations for the plays that went on. He worked around, but he wasn't going to join the church. And then he left Salt Lake and went to Seattle. Never saw him again.
Until.
And years later, 40 years later, it was at Melissa's homecoming, or wedding reception. They walked in the door. And I said, Helmut, what are you doing here? You know, good to see you. And he smiled and he said, we've been going through the temples in California. That's how he told us that he joined the church. And he went down for a 2-month stay, or a 2-week stay on family research. Then he came back he and his wife came back for a 1.5 years on the research there. And while he was there, he called me and said, I'm speaking in church and I'd like you to come down. So Carol and I retooled down there and we find the darkest corner to sit in. We're not going to bother any of it. Just sit there and listen. And he was halfway through his talk and then he said, Ike, stand up. So I stood up and he said, that's the man that got me into the church. Now that's 40 years. But, sow your seeds. You don't know when they're going to grow. And that's one of the best feelings I had when I saw him come in that day and tell me that they joined the church by going to the temple.
That story. You know that story.
Yeah, but he wasn't in Sweden, he was in Denmark. But I went down, after we got through with our mission, a little bit more lax with missionaries. And so my friend and I decided to ride our bikes down through Europe. We never be back again. And so we...
Mine's about tour Europe the last year of your mission?
Huh?
Nothing?
So we rode our bikes down through Europe. We stopped in Denmark to see my partner's sister's boyfriend. And his companion was there, and he was married, and he gave me a tablecloth to take home to her.
Oh, wow.
And I got busy, and I didn't take it to her. And he called me one day and he said, "Did you take that to my wife?" And I said, "No, I saved it." Good. She had divorced him. And he called him right home. And he was a really a great guy. And he was with some friends. He decided to go float the Reba River at its height.
Uh-oh.
And he told the guys, he said, "I've done everything I can. I'm ready to go." And he drowned that day.
Oh. You know what I'm talking about.
Okay, now, I had found out exactly where grandmother's home was. There were some second cousins,
This is in Sweden.
Sweden.
Okay, not
They
Denmark.
told me where it was. And it's a little, there's a town called Örebro, and it was a little, like Sugar House was to Salt Lake. And it's Beachboro, the name of it. They told me how the place was. And when I got there, I recognized their description, I knew the house. People had just bought it, and they made a summer home out of it. But before I went into it, I saw this little old man gardening in his garden behind a white picket fence. And I went over and talked to him. And I asked him, "Would this be the home of Charlotte Nielsen?" And as soon as I mentioned her name, tears flowed down his face. And in his sobs he said, "She was my childhood sweetheart. I took her to the train when she took it to Denmark to fly to take the ship to America. So I knew I'd found the right place. They let me go into the place, and it was unique. On the one end of the kitchen was an open fire with pots hanging here and there that they would lower and raise depending on how fast they wanted to cook. So it was and they had an open hood over it to catch the smoke and take it out. But that was their kitchen that they were cooking in. They didn't have a stove. They had this open fire.
Yeah. How old was she when she left Sweden?
What's that?
How old was she when she left Sweden?
18.
And no family went with her?
Well, yeah. In Peaceboro, there was a group. There was a guy that joined the church, and he went back to Peaceboro to talk to his family and friends.
For her mom and dad?
Well,
Yeah,
was that Charlotta?
yeah. And she was a seamstress for Brigham Young. Not in the Lion House, but what was the other house next to it?
Tiger House?
Beehive.
Beehive House?
Beehive.
Beehive House. She lived at Beehive House and did all the sewing in there.
Yeah.
I've got a picture of
So she came over, the only member of her family, her mom and dad, didn't come.
Yeah,
They didn't join.
I've got a picture of her family, her and herself and the boys and the girls, and she had made every bit of clothes that was on those people. So she was a beautiful seamstress.